FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
Democratic leadership in Congress and every Democratic candidate for president without exception wants to get out as quickly as we can. John Burns, quote, "A quick early withdrawal of American troops would very likely lead to catastrophic levels of violence there." Do you agree with that?
Yes, that seems self-evident, yes.
Does it seem self-evident? What about the argument that if they had to sort things out by force of arms, they'd get it sorted out and the Kurds would have Kurdistan, the Sunnis would get backed by Syria, and there would be some kind of region that they would carve out. It would be...
Not by Syria, by Saudi Arabia, I'm afraid.
By Saudi Arabia?
By the most sectarian regional powers would take a hand, the Iranian theocracy and the Saudi one.
It would be brutal. Lots of people would be killed, but they'd settle it out and achieve some kind of stability. Is that simply incorrect?
I think it's absolutely incorrect. It could mean in the long run...
Is it even implausible?
It could mean in the long run that at least what casualties there were would not be, so to say, on our watch. We couldn't avoid responsibility for the immediate surge in death that would undoubtedly be. And I personally cannot imagine a future Iraq composed of only three splinters, a Kurdish, a Sunni, and a Shia one. There's no solidarity of any ethnic or social sort between Sunni and Shia. It's a religious definition only. It's a clerical definition. There are already great rivalries in Basra between different kinds of Shia militia, some of them supported by Iran, some not. So not all the Saudis, not all the Sunnis want Wahhabi Sunni gangsterism in their country either. What would happen would be what would have happened, by the way, if we'd never intervened, which would mean that Iraq would have been invaded all right and destabilized, but by tribal and sectarian and atomizing forces. There'll be partitions within partitions. The place will...
So the Peter Galbraith's argument you reject, the notion that the best thing to have done would have been to divvy this thing up into three different countries. We have to fight for a unified Iraq. We have to fight for an entity called Iraq is understood, as it was created by the British in the 20s, because there's no choice between that and a kind of endless splintering. Is that your position?
I would support Peter Galbraith, whose work is very admirable and whose book, The End of Iraq, is an extraordinarily good book.
He knows a lot.
Is right about the Kurdish question, but even he says that we'd have to remain in a position where we could strike al-Qaeda forces in Iran, even if only from over the horizon in Kurdistan, which would mean we couldn't abandon Baghdad altogether to the nearest militiaman. Everyone would live, there would be republics within Iraq the size of a couple of city blocks with their own warlord. I mean, you have to realize how atomizing and how demoralizing, how debauching, how traumatizing the 35 years of Saddam's fascism were. The utter wreckage of any possibility of a political class emerging, for example. All possible rivals destroyed.
So
inculcation of fear of the nearest armed person, people forced to denounce one another, forced to betray one another, reduced really to a Hobbesian state. This is what.
Yugoslavia is not a model.
No.
Tito sat on the thing, held it together. He goes, and they divvy it up. It's messy, very messy. Lots of people get killed, but you've got stability. There is such a thing as Slovenia. There is such a thing as Croatia. That is simply not an option for Iraq.
I don't believe so, because I think, again, it would be a vacuum, as it was becoming before, into which the Saudis, the Iranian theocracy, and others would intervene.
All right.